We were thinking that if he's expecting the Paladin ban from Ender, he might ban away Ender's Paladin as well,
Yes.
or the Mage.
Yeah, so even though this series ends up with decks that we have seen a fair amount, the Cthulhu Druid already has done damage. I mean, I always consider a ban game just kind of a win in its category. It's got a special win category where
Sure.
it's drawn a lot of percentage points towards in that favor because you get to play the regular decks that you want to, pressure your opponent with. So it's interesting that he chose the Cthulhu Druid because, I do think that. The Spiteful Priest is very similar to the Cthulhu Druid just in its core, but it's got a little bit better matchup spread. So he actually chose to ban that over the Spiteful Priest, even though they're similar in strategy.
Yeah, I really wonder what the thought process is behind that because kind of every time I've seen Ender play the lineup, it seems like the Priest always comes out a bit more consistently than the Druid.
Yeah.
And that's why many more players are bringing Spiteful Priest than any Druid.
Maybe Aku just thought about the implications of if he loses, he doesn't want to lose to a Cthulhu Druid. He says, I'm just going to get taken down by the good decks. It's one of those things where I just refuse to go down
The
to.
dignity ban?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so Aku not quite getting the ideal Mana Worm on turn 1 start. At least he had something to deal with, the early Murloc play from Ender, but now Ender will take the board control, and without a Frostbolt to pair with his Mana Worm, it seems like Aku will be playing from behind for a while. The Secret Mage does struggle with this matchup because it goes wide on board, and as we know, Secret Mage always has a difficult time dealing with more than one minion at a time, especially if it doesn't take the early board.
Yeah, they really just don't have any tools. They're very reliant on like a primordial glyph to make a comeback, and that's why some players have put in that very weird Frost Nova package to give them time to find burn in those scenarios. But in this case, it's so early that Secret Mage really can't climb back without those big tempo swing tools.
Yeah, it already feels like Aku is on the ropes here, but the glyph could be his out. So something like an early Flame Strike could be huge.
Well, all of these spells will cost 0, which is very nice, given that you have the 2-mana discount and the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Vaporize is somewhat interesting to control the state of the board. Spellbender, not really that useful, except for a Blessing of Kings if it's even relevant.
Yeah, it's just the one.
So it's just Arcane Intellect. Akumaker just wants to improve his hand. Can't blame him. He wants to get that big decisive swing with these Valet, Cabal Crystal Runners, and of course, any secrets to shut down board development.
Right, and Aku managed to build up a board that challenges Ender's current board, but if he gets something like Health or Divine Shield off this Megasaur, that could just be lights out. These aren't the best choices for Ender, though.
Yeah, an aggressive option. So, but I think the Mage is okay with that because they just don't want the board to be sticky with, like you said, plus Health or Divine Shield. That would have been disastrous.
So now Aku, despite taking that much health damage, this might be the one window for him to try and earn back the board. So he can play Fireball, but he'd still have to trade off his whole board. And he can take the initiative by pairing it with Arcanologist, but is it too little, too late?
Yeah, and what are you really afraid of on turn 5, generally? I guess at this point you're afraid of the Call to Arms.
Yeah.
So Arcanologist kind of contests the board a little bit. I guess he just wants to get ahead of the Call to Arms that you're not going to even play it.
Sure.
And that makes sense, too. Ooh, it's close.
It's really close because if you play the counter spell, then you're punished by just like 2 regular minions.
Right, exactly, which is very similar to the Call to Arms development anyways, and now you're behind because you don't have the 2-3 on board.
Oh, right, and this Order of Trade at least gives him the Mana Word still surviving. Of course, it's very awkwardly blocked by the Righteous Protector, but in this matchup, every little bit of minion presence counts.
Yeah, good sequencing, of course, from Ender to test for the explosive runes. Doesn't want a Knife Juggler and then get it blown up.
So the juggle on this, I would say, is not that relevant because the Mana Worm is still roadblocked very annoyingly here. Of course, Ender still would have preferred it to hit on the minion. So Aku, I still feel like he needs to run into another Primordial Glyph into cheap AoE to come back here.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for a series of draws and plays for Aku that can help bail him out. And it's not looking good with his hand. You know, he's got some high value stuff, Firelands Portal and Alunath, but he almost has no more time left.
Yeah, these are just not the spells that are equipped to deal with wide boards, and the juggler being left up is quite a big problem for Aku. But I guess he's hoping that he can maybe survive 1 or 2 turns and then maybe get um, a taunt off of the Firelands portal, which could stifle the pressure from
It's
Ender.
true. Yeah, there's a handful of cards that'd be excellent, whether it is just a very big taunt like Earth Elemental or even an Abomination can come up really big to stop a lot of those small minions from hitting him.
Right, and Aku with the mini Christmas tree actually, I think, gives Ender full information as to what the secrets are.
Yeah.
Because you got one of each. So Ender thinking about which minion he wants to feed to the explosive rooms, and I think it's the Chum because he's at a safe 30 health anyway. Okay, I can understand going for the Inquisitor if he values being able to play more minions rather than the War Leader. And it makes sense because Mage does indeed struggle with this board, and it always just makes sense to play more Murlocs before you play the War Leader to buff them up, so that the buff has charge, essentially.
Yeah, and without Primordial Glyph, there's no real way for Aku to easily deal with this board. Deez Valet finally gets into the hand, but is it too late to get those big tempo swings here?
Oh, he can Valet, Ping, and Explosive runes. Explosive, well, Ender will probably play around it by going Spellbreaker first, but yeah,
Still an Ice Block
yeah,
pop, right?
if Ender had missequenced, then maybe it could have prevented an Ice Block pop, but yeah, no such amateur trip ups from Ender, who is definitely very experienced both on ladder and now a little bit more so in tournaments as well.
Yeah. And with this, if Ender can stick a single 1-mana or 1-attack minion, Aku is dead, but the Firelands Portal can put a taunt.
Or he can draw into the second glyph, and those are just about his only outs.
Yes. This needs to be something defensive.
Ali Armorsmith would be insane. Well, actually, there's a Spellbender, so Spellbreaker, so it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Just so close to stabilizing, but he can't. And that is going to be game number 1 over to Ender.
Yeah, makes you wonder again about Aku's ban on the Cthulhu Druid, but again, this is just one matchup that we've seen, and he's probably considering the overall matchups of his lineup against the Cthulhu Druid, which could maybe prey a bit more on his slower decks.
Well, you were thinking. What was your suggestion for the ban? Because we were kind of going all over it.
First instinct was Paladin, right?
First instinct was Paladin, and
then we kind of backtracked and said, okay, if he's expecting a Paladin ban, maybe you ban the Mage. But yeah, and this just goes to show that Ender was feeling confident here because all of his decks have some pretty good matchups across the board against all of Aku's decks.
Ender is heavily favored, especially if he's able to get a win with his. If he's able to get a win with his Secret Mage, that's going to be really big. But we'll see what ends up happening here. I mean, Murloc Paladin versus Secret Mage does end up going historically to Murloc Paladin's favor. It is the Achilles heel of Secret Mage's ladder rampage. Without that, I think Secret Mage would be a top tier, the top tier deck for ladder at least.
Yeah, and a lot of the decks that, even though they're on top tier on ladder, they really shine in tournaments because if they have just that one deck preying on them, well, you can ban that away and then get away with a lot of wins here. So Aku, the onus is on him to try and sneak out, I guess, one unfavored win and then maybe get some good Q order going.
Yeah, it's peculiar because the Secret Mage might end up showing its weakness again in this series. You know, it depends on who can get the Secret Mage win first. And so Akumaker probably queue up the Secret Mage to try to see if he can sneak a win and get his best matchup in the mirror, perhaps. But there's also the Big Priest problem. Big Priest is not supposed to beat these decks. You know, Big Priest is, much better at killing, other types of archetypes, a little bit slower variants. You can get the Barns, and you can really turn the tides there. But against Secret Mage and the Spiteful Priest, it gets blown out a lot of the times.
Right, so it's actually going to be the Spiteful Priest versus the Big Priest, and pretty inclined to give this to the Spiteful Priest. What do you think?
Yeah, the Spiteful Priest, I think, for sure, is really good at pressuring. I don't know how Big Priest usually wins, because whenever I play this matchup specifically, I usually play from the Big Priest. That's right, I'm a dirty Big Priest player. I usually just get blown out super early, and my removal sometimes doesn't even work, because Dragonfire Potion doesn't even touch their mid-range options.
Right, and when they get to stick Spiteful minions with huge attack, Pint-Sized Horror doesn't always clear everything, too.
Yeah. I do have a question for you. Is that a Northshire Cleric on 1 for the Spiteful Priest?
Yes.
Huh.
Have we seen that
Weird.
at all
Never
this
happened.
weekend?
No, it's not, of course, just a complaint. It's just more I can't believe it keeps happening every time.
And it's curving out pretty well. And just the fact that the Spiteful Priest is equipped with all these late game tools that do pretty well against Big Priest, like Mind Control or getting the Mind Control off the Grand Archivist. If they stick a Yasharaj early on, you can either silence it or swap it to deal with it, well, temporarily at least.
Yeah. And it might be even a little bit harder for Aku to deal with it, because he's a little bit light on some of the removal options. He's got like the 1 pain, 1 death, and like the 1 psychic scream. So that does end up making him a little bit more vulnerable if these big spiteful boards come out to a point where he can't really answer it easily.
Right, and the Deathbreaker option is usually attractive, but definitely not in this matchup. Do you like the Scaled Nightmare? Just because the Bookworm's not going to hit many targets.
That's funny. I mean, Bookworm can hit Barnes.
Okay, exactly, Barnes.
And I mean, you have Twilight Acolyte, so that's the big thing, I guess. Twilight
True.
Acolyte ensures that you can hit anything with Bookworm.
Yeah, over 2 turns, most likely. So Aku, very much just anxious to get to that turn 6 where he can start getting the minion pressure going. He doesn't have Resurrect other than the Spellstone in hand yet, and you generally want to save the Spellstone for when it can get more stuff. So he's definitely just going to be playing the reactive game. And it's really up to the Big Priest to parcel out the limited removals for the many threats coming from the Spiteful Priest.
Ooh, there we go. Now we actually have some action.
Yeah, that's a curve. For 2 turns.
Call it a curve, yeah.
yeah. Coin 6 and a 6.
Yeah, I like it.
Like,
If
about as good as you can ask for as Big Priest if you're not a Barnes gamer.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing is that Ysera always gives you the option to get big cards that can swing the board, like Ysera Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see what ends up happening off this Mind Control.
Yeah, and Ender feeling very good about coining out. I mean, having seen
That's why he banned the Cthulhu Druid, because he knew this would happen.
But yeah, having seen Ahu coin out when 6-drop means that the coin Psychic Scream is not active yet, so Ender feels very good about going wide on the board here. Cthulhu, not the best 10-drop, but we're not complaining when we're this far ahead. So Pint-Sized Horror clears everything except the Cthulhu. Feel like Aku might have to pull the trigger on it though, because otherwise that's way too much damage coming his way next turn.
Yeah, that's 17 on the board. Wow,
Wow.
no fear. Guess the Obsidian statue,
Dang, that is quite a risky play. I guess Lich King also represented a taunt minion.
Right.
And maybe he feels like he has to take these risks into maybe a bigger board to Psychic Scream.
That's true. You can hit Yasharaj, which also gives him another chance at it. So 3 out of 4 minions, reasonable. And it's not like this deck is known for the burst from hand. So if he's playing with 4 health, in his mind, he's willing to take that risk.
Right, and the other thing that you risk is Ender not having the silence in hand. Of course, it is only a 1-of, but we see it's there, so I expect Ender to just push face like this, force him to have the Scream, and even when the Scream comes down, he has a little bit of refill. Ooh, the Fairy Dragon seems like
I
a
think
bit too much in my opinion.
you still have lethal very much, and his removal options are very similar across the board with Dragonfire Potion, Psychic Scream, Circle of Healing, etc., and it all gets swept in it. So it's really interesting.
Fairy Dragon dies to any AoE. That would kill most of his stuff anyway.
It's also holding 4 cards that are Dragon's Energy dependent.
Yeah.
And you kind of like to have your own independent dragon there.
It's a bit interesting.
Yeah.
When you like to jam a Scaled Nightmare in here.
Yeah, I would, personally. I mean, he's probably thinking about, you know, how do I get past these big individual targets I'm trying to push. Aku's okay with playing very
Hearthstone?
risky here, but I think that's another reason why you want to put the Shadow Essence out, because he had that Spellstone. He's trying to look for ways to eventually flip the board fast enough before Ender can get to those mind control stages.
Thing is, it's only Sarah that died, right? Because the statue was shuffled
Shuffled, you're
back.
right.
So Aku forced to use one of his not few but like finite board clears, and it often feels like when you're playing against Spiteful Priest, you need infinite clears because they just have threat after threat.
Yeah.
But Aku, importantly, is able to gain the board for himself. Laughing Sister actually proving to be a good drop from you, Sarah. That doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. Yeah, just minion generation, so that Spellstone can just do more than just summon back a single Ysera. And then he has the Obsidian Statue. Does know that Ender at least has one mind control in the deck based off the Spiteful Summoner reveal. It's going to be a little scary for Aku dropping any minion into mind control, though. So we'll see what ends up happening there.
So Bookworm had one of its very few targets in the Laughing Sister, but Ender values getting more damage on board, I suppose. And yeah, an additional silence is actually an insane pickup because the way Aku's playing, it's just been, okay, survive until I can drop the Obsidian Statue because I've seen the Cabal Song Stealer. So if he feels like he can safely drop this taunt, that means that Ender just gets over the line.
That silence, by the way, actually is so important because then now Aku can't play the Obsidian Statue.
Yeah, and he's deciding to respect it.
Yeah.
Despite it meaning that he gives up his own Laughing Sister, but it's definitely the right read in this situation. And now Ender running low on the threats that we said can be near endless.
Yeah, it's 2 damage, but I don't think that really matters there in this context. If Akumaker is going to win, it's not by the 2 damage. It's going to certainly be because he dominated the board. Man, that Scaled Nightmare would have looked really good right now.
Yeah.
And in the end, doesn't get the Bookworm synergy that you're that you're saving this for.
Yeah, so if he had taken Scaled Nightmare, probably would have eaten a Potion Horror at some point, and then he would have had the Tar Creeper in one other minion. Maybe not too big a difference, but that's a pretty good draw.
So I think Aku has a pretty good read now on what Ender has. It has some kind of removal tool to get past this Obsidian Statue. And so, because Ender's had the opportunity to play clear board, and he's just avoiding playing that card. And Draconer Operative usually picks up like the card you ideally want.
Yeah, the Historian provided some much-needed value for Ender's hand, and just another annoying board for Aku to have to deal with. However, he's now had enough time to fit in those hero powers that a silence won't kill him yet if he just plays Obsidian Statue.
So this is summon back the Laughing Sister and the Ysera if he uses a Spellstone, unless we're missing something else.
I think that's about it.
And is, considering mind control as a possibility on his minion as well, what happens? What does it look like if he deals with that? Decided to pull the trigger, though.
No matter what he plays, mind control is a huge punish, and that could be it. So Ender can just go for the silence and the Archivist, and pretty much no matter the outcome, he's looking in a good spot.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Yash Rush as well, sure.
Power loading stats.
He has seen the Psychic Scream.
Yeah, this is one of the downsides of only one Psychic Scream removal.
That's just gonna be the game.
If he trades it in and revives it, though, does that keep him alive potentially?
Okay, if the minion kill lands on, nah, he doesn't. He can go up to 4. Okay, so yeah, if Ender doesn't pick up some removal for this statue, if the Yasharaj trades in and then it kills the Operative exactly, then he can survive, but it's pretty low odds, especially since Ender can play 1 more minion, maybe 2 depending on what he draws.
Right, or just mind control for the win.
Yeah.
This is why Big Priest struggles in this matchup. The pressure is just too much.
And that's just an easy answer. That is his 3rd Song Stealer of the game. Something insane like that, and Aku's
just
reaction.
Keep drawing it, man. No matter what keeps happening, no matter how many times it gets shuffled in, just keeps drawing the Cabal Song Stealer.
And did we catch an Aku smile there near the end? The
It's
very
more
rare and
of
elusive
you know,
reaction.
it's more of like I can only cope with this by laughing. It's a defense mechanism in the brain that prevents him from you know, smashing the keyboard.
Yeah, and among Aku's friends, it seems like an inside joke that they like to take screenshots of him during games and turn them into memes. So hoping this game is gonna produce some new memes to be laughed at. And now Ender got to be feeling really comfortable, up 2-0.
Yeah.
And Aku, I wonder if he's... No, I don't wonder about anything. He looks pretty anxious here.
I mean, from the very get-go, I was pegging Ender to be the heavy favorite here. And it's so interesting to think about that a person didn't bring Warlock and is this favored against a traditionally powerful lineup. And Aku, I wonder if he's gonna be able to bail himself out again. He's had to go up against 2 to 3 opponents in this bracket so far that have had counter lineups to him, but he's able to beat them. Well, he lost the first one on stream. Then ever since then, in the losers bracket, he's been tearing it up. Even though he's told me like, man, I've been unfavored.
After the Jack Attack 03, unfortunately, Aku did actually just grind through the lower bracket with a bunch of 3-2s, I believe, tons of close games, and he's worked hard to make it to this point, so it's gotta be disappointing to go down 0-2 like this, but not out of it yet. Ender, I believe, is left with the Secret Mage. So that's a deck that can beat itself sometimes if it doesn't draw the synergy. If you draw all minions or all secrets, things like that. It's kind of hard to rely on it to do that 3 times in a row, though. So, yeah, Aku definitely on the ropes.
Yeah, consider that Mana Worms in the hand for turn 1. Oh, sorry, that's Akumaker saying. That's a good start.
Ender does have the Alaneth, though, which can be pretty insane in the mirror if both players go head-to-head pretty evenly at the start. And Aku might be a bit of a problem here.
Yes, I think we're going to call over the admins. Could be that the game may have crashed.
I'm hearing Aku say he banned Mage. We saw in the icon so that he banned Druid.
Oh, he says he banned Mage.
That is,
So he was expecting to go up against Druid now.
Okay, seems like there was a bit of miscommunication on this, and we're not really sure about the protocol on how this happens, because if it's a ban that you did early on and then you got to play these other games, it feels like some of the other games might not necessarily be valid just because you queue with a certain, order of decks in mind. I don't know, but...
Well, apparently us and the admins may have gotten it wrong, and then Ender probably heard what they were saying, like, oh, he banned my Druid, so this is how I'm going to do it. But, thankfully this was only the first game where I encountered,
Yeah, so we're just going to wait on the verdict from the admin. The meantime, I feel like this kind of makes sense in that we expected not the Druid ban. In fact,
yeah, that was weird, to say the least, I don't know if banning Druid is the way to go.
As casters, sometimes you see something weird and you're like trying to rack your brains to justify the decision, and then turns out sometimes it's just a straight up mistake.
Well, I mean, we kind of disagree with it in the beginning, but I'm open to creative choices if you feel like you're unfavored, right? Sometimes you take risks, but ban strategies often are pretty clear cut. It's usually a numbers game, and the numbers are fluctuating based off of how you built your decks. Sometimes I'm better against these kinds of classes because I have weapon removal, or I have specific tech cards.
Yeah, and it seems like the verdict is, despite the games that were completed, we're just going to change the ban from Akumaker. He definitely did say Mage. There was just some miscommunication for Enders and for us.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, that he thought it was a Druid ban, so it doesn't change all that much the way the early games panned out.
It was meant to be. Drew Mana Worm again. And he's gonna need that in order to finish off Druid. And Ender picks up Greedy Sprite, which is always one of the more interesting things, considering that you don't really want to play Wild Growth, obviously because you have Spiteful Summoner.
I was going to say, if Aku picked up a secret there, the turn gets really insane. And Arcanologist kind of accomplishes the same thing as Kirin Mage when you have the Lackey to pair with it. So, yeah, Cthulhu Druid, while it has some good matchups against slower decks, it really preys on them by being able to, not give up the early board completely and then really consolidate. by playing the Spiteful Summoner. When it doesn't get the early board, it snowballs out of control really quick.
Another secret. Kirin Tor Mage. And options with the Mediz Valet as well. This is interesting.
Yeah, I feel like protecting the Mana Worm is really attractive here, but I don't think you would go so far as to give up the huge power turn of Kirin Tor Mage plus Secret in favor of using the Valet to clear, because like getting the damage in with the Mana Worm now and forcing your opponent to clear kind of makes sense because you're putting the same amount of damage on board anyway. And it's all just about putting on the pressure as soon as possible. The Druid deck doesn't run any removal outside of Ultimate Infestation, which is miles away.
Yeah.
And the taunts are in the form of Cthulhu buffing minions.
Very crucially, his Elder's Chosen has, or I don't know why I say Elder's Chosen. Twilight Elder buffed it to 7, which means Dark Arakoa will get Cthulhu to 10 and activate the Twin Emperor Veclor. Is that going to be enough time, though? Secret Mage is pretty much nut drawing Ender right in front of his face.
Doesn't look like there's too much time, especially with some more burn in hand. That's just a blowout.
This is so yeah, Ender's just like, really, man?
Yeah, seriously?
Oh, it's more taunts.
And that is just the game, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Crossbow,
8 damage.
Yeah, he's got 1 over with the ping.
Right.
So, turns out, that's why you don't ban Druid.
Well, Cthulhu Druid is favored against the Secret Mage on paper, and I'm guessing it's because...
Is it?
Yeah, just according to like ladder stats.
Really?
If you look at it both lenses, it actually is the case. If you look at Cthulhu Druid or Spiteful Druid, if you depends on how you respect it or categorize it, it's both favored slightly against the mage. But that didn't look like it at all. It was blowout. It was a blowout victory. Wow.
I suppose Spiteful decks in general can be said to have some advantage against Secret Mages in that they strand the counter spells in hand because they won't hit any spells until very late on.
Yeah.
But yeah, when the Spiteful deck doesn't really hit the 1/2, which is basically Enchanted Raven and things like that, yeah, they stick 1 or 2 minions, which scale up really quickly because you're mage, and then there's just no removal. And Spiteful Priest at least has Duskbreaker to deal with those, but the Druid really struggles.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, we're still in the thick of this series, and after Game 3, Akumaker showing some life. So don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to find out what's going to happen, who's going to move on to the top 3.
HCT stop is proudly supported by McDonald's Australia.
Trade a heart for heart, then our souls will be lost forever. Keep your fingertips close to mine, close to mine, close to mine. Keep your fingertips close to mine, close to mine, close to mine. So I'll never let you go, never let you go.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Hearthstone Championship Tour's tour stop in Sydney, Australia. We're currently in the middle of a series to determine the top 4 here between Akumaker and Ender. As if you guys watched the previous series, Odyssey from Thailand is moving on, and of course we have Jack Attack and Professor Oak in the winners and the lower bracket finals, respectively. So that's going to set up the stage for the last 2 games at most between Aku and Ender. We have a Cthulhu Druid who has to go up to bat yet again. And it's going to go up against either... it's actually going up against Secret Mage. Apologies, it just lost Secret Mage. It has to go up against the Paladin or the Priest.
Yeah, and these aren't the matchups that Ender really was expecting to deal with. I believe Ender actually banned away the Paladin, so it's going to deal with the Cube Warlock and the Priest. And
Oh, you are correct. I was looking at it backwards.
Right, so Ender was mentioning backstage that he built the Cthulhu Druid, or brought it, with the thought in mind that he'd be dealing with some more control decks. And although he feels more comfortable piloting that deck against the slower, pure control decks like Mage and Control Paladin, Big Priest and Q Warlock are still okay matchups for him because they sometimes can struggle to find the removal and give the Druid the time to curve out very well. However, if there are some slow decks to deal with the Cthulhu Druid, these are the ones that might have a better shot at it.
Yep, this is something that's also very prevalent about the Spiteful Druids, is that they play Prince Keleseth still.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's largely because Druid doesn't have that many great 2-mana minions, but it's just how powerful of a curve it can still lead to. And it's so interesting to me because Prince Keleseth for a long time was a card that people complained about, but ever since the patches nerf, it seems it's very much in line with all the other legendary parallels that you'd come to expect. Although, given when you play it on curve versus not playing on curve, it's quite the stark difference.
Yeah, it's been quite a while since we've seen Keleseth on 2 on a competitive stage.
And you almost missed it in a way? Is that what you're implying?
No, I was going to say it might be giving some viewers some PTSD, and Aku clearly very unhappy to see that, kind of ruffling his hair. At least he does have the Shadow Essence. He missed the Coin Barns, which Ender, no reaction to, but you got to be happy when you get over that hump. And drawing into Spiteful Summoner and having the Mire Keeper curve, this is going to get out of hand real quick.
I mean, the Spellstone, again, we kind of talk about how core it is to the Big Priest identity to revive minions. But I think what Aku is really concerned about is the state of the board, and that's why he takes the Circle of Healing. Spellstone is great and all, but he needs to find a way to deal with the early pressure, considering that the ramp has been savagely on point at this point.
Yeah. The way things work out is that if he coins Dragonfire Potion, he won't have the coin for later on to go into an early Psychic Scream. It makes it a little bit awkward the way the mana lines up, so Aku decides that he's gonna hold out for more minions to hit, and I think that he needed to not really take the risk. It just makes sense, although he just needs to grit and bear the 15 damage hitting him in the face this turn. He does have, from this point on, like, decent clears, and no, the Dragonfire just doesn't clear everything. But Anduin is actually surprisingly good.
Anduin's fantastic against the Keleseth buff, which happens to catch things like the Spiteful Summoner. But yeah, as a player going up against Spiteful decks in general, you don't have to respect their burst nearly as much. However, against the Druid, they have multiple forms where they can add burst, whether through the Ultimate Infestations or even just Cthulhu itself, which has yet to see play, by the way. Has not actually come into play at all through its battle cry.
Yeah, it's just off of Spiteful Summoner. Maybe that's the real name of, like, that's where the name Cthulhu Druid comes off of. Like, you get it off Spiteful Summoner. It's not named for the Cthulhu that's actually in the deck.
Oh yeah.
And
that's lethal setup next turn. This is going to be just a bluff victory. Both players are playing a mile a minute here.
Well, Anduin can help him survive between the armor game and the trade onto the Spellbreaker.
Does it, though? Because there's still damage on board.
Well, from Aku's perspective, he goes up to 8 and then leaves 3. But then Ender has the additional 5 with the Ultimate Infestation, can even Kun on top of it. So That was just a blowout. It was looking like Aku might have had a little bit of a chance there, gaining momentum with the win using a Secret Mage, but sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles. You get Keleseth, you get Mario Keeper into Spiteful.
And Cthulhu again watches and cheers from the sidelines. Ender is going to move on to the Final Four here, the HCT Sydney Tour stop. And I gotta say, man, that last game was just kind of a steamroll, but the game before that was a steamroll for Akumaker, and it just felt like when you go head-to-head like this, when there's matchups that are very favored one side or the other, you can get some really big snowball victories like that. I mean, that's what these tempo decks excel on, or mid-range decks. They just stack the advantage, and then at one point, there's no looking back.
Right, and I want to highlight how the